Hi there, this is Morgan with Morgan Burke's Photography and Product Shop, and today I'm going to show you how to dodge and burn non-destructively on your photo. So I'm going to use this image to edit today, and in this case I went a little bit far with my dodging and burning. I wanted it to be a little bit of a surreal effect, so if this is a little stronger, this is the before. And this is the after. So if this is a little stronger than your normal editing style, that's completely fine. You're welcome to apply this effect as much or as little as you'd like. So in this case, I'm going to show you how I achieved this kind of dramatic effect using dodging and burning. So again, this is the before and this is the after. So I'm just going to turn these layers off and then we'll recreate them together. So the first thing I'm going to do is just at the bottom of my layers panel, hit the half black, half white circle and select levels. Now the settings you choose will depend on your photo. Basically, I want to kind of bring up the highlights here. So I'm going to drag my highlight slider, that's the one on the top right. I'm going to drag that one over to the left a little bit. I want to drag it a little too far because I'm not going to apply it at 100% opacity. So, and then I'm going to bring my midtones up just a little bit too. And I think that looks, you know what, I'm going to bring my highlights down a little bit and bring my midtones up a little more. And this is just me playing around. You can tweak these settings later after you paint this effect on. So if it's not perfect or you're not sure what settings to choose, just brighten up a bit and then you can always tweak it to perfection later. Okay, so once I've brightened the photo, what I want to do is my layer mask on this levels layer is automatically selected. And if you're not familiar with layer masks, basically it's telling you or allowing Photoshop to display the effect on that layer. So in this case, our effect is the brightening that we just added. And what I want to do is just hide that brightening from the whole photo for now. And so to do that, I'm going to hit Control or Command I on my keyboard, and that hides that whole brightness effect. So as you can see, my layer mask is now black, the effect is hidden. So what I'm going to do here is just grab my paintbrush tool, make sure that my foreground color is set to white and my opacity is set to 10%. Now sometimes I do apply this at 5% opacity, sometimes I apply it a little higher. The lower your opacity is, the more you're able to achieve a sort of gradual effect as you're applying this. It's easy to get a little heavy-handed with dodging and burning. So if you want to make sure that you apply it more gradually, I would go with the lower opacity. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just zoom in. And then I'm just going to start painting this effect on to areas that I'd like to brighten. And again, my opacity is at 10%. And what I'm going to do here is just make my brush a little bit bigger for now. And I'm doing this by hitting the right bracket key on my keyboard. Your bracket keys are right next to the letter P, or at least they are on my keyboard. So what I'm going to do here is just start sweeping this on. And they are sitting under this giant hedge, so they're a little bit in shadow. So what I want to do is just kind of pull their features out of the shadows here. And I am at 10% opacity, but I'm going to make a few clicks of my mouse to gradually build that effect up. And so here I'm just sweeping over his eyes, and I'll turn this on and off so you can see I've just brightened him up just a little bit. And so I want to do that for each of them here. And just be careful not to be too strong, but if your effect goes on a little strong, you can always turn the opacity down of this layer later. So what I like to do is just not worry about it yet. I just do all my painting for this dodging effect here. And then later on, if I need to tweak it, I always can. Okay, so again, I'm just making several clicks over their eyes to just brighten them up out of the shadows a little bit here. Okay. And then I'm just going to start sweeping over the rest of their features. So here I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm using my left bracket key to do that. And I'm going to sweep over his teeth a little bit, make my brush a little larger, and sweep over his face. And you know, you could make your brush bigger and just go over their whole face. What I like to do is add a little bit of dimension by sweeping over individual features. And this is just something that I've come to prefer after trial and error. So if you want to experiment with doing it different ways, you know, maybe you want to paint over their whole face and then do, you know, a little bit of selective brightening later, you're welcome to do that. I'm just going to kind of go over individual features here, which does seem to take a little longer. So feel free to adjust on your own images. Okay, so I am just going to go over, basically what I want to do is touch on anywhere that the highlights are kind of falling on their skin as it is, and you can sort of see where their cheeks are a little bit brighter, or maybe the little spots on their forehead or their chin where the light is touching. So basically I just want to increase that a little bit and make it look like the light was a little stronger than it was. And so I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, go over her nose here, up the bridge of her nose, and then paint a little more on her forehead. And then go over her teeth here, and his the same way. Okay. Okay, making my brush a little smaller and going over the bridge of his nose. You can do this brother as well. And here he is a glasses wearer. So you can maybe notice a little bit of darkness on the bridge of his nose. So you might just touch over areas like that a little with a couple more sweeps than you normally would. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here with levels is just applying some base brightening, and then we're going to go in with a different contouring or dodging and burning effect that I'm going to show you in just a second. So basically you don't have to go super in depth with this if you don't want to, but I'm going to start going just a little bit faster here so we don't lose too much time. And so I noticed as I zoomed out that her nose area just below it looks a little dark. So I'm just going to sweep over that. And then I'm going to go out, and since I did this on their face, I'm actually going to apply this whole effect to their clothes, their legs, their branch that they're sitting on, or log, I should say. And so just to kind of make everything look even, so that this, fake light effect that we're exaggerating here would essentially be applied to everything if it was a real lighting effect. So that's what I want to make sure that I apply that brightness everywhere. Okay, so notice just a little bit of darkness here on his forehead, and then, oops, sorry. That is, if you want to see where you've applied your brush stroke so far, you can hit the button right above your enter key or right below your backspace key, and it'll show you where your brush effects were applied. You can also hit this button down here at the bottom of your layers panel. This is called quick mask mode, and it allows you to kind of see where you've painted. And sometimes I accidentally hit this when I'm adjusting the size of my brush, so that's why that popped up. I'm going to turn that off. Again, just by hitting that button between my enter and backspace keys. Okay, so I am going to make my brush a little larger here and just sweep over their clothes. And if you'll notice, the size of my brush is smaller than the width of his arm, but I'm going to paint in a straight line down the length of his arm, and this is sort of just to add that directional lighting in. And I'm going to follow the texture of their clothes where the highlights are hitting, and just kind of pull that out of the shadows there. And same thing on his little wrinkles of his shirt. Oops, accidentally hit that quick mask mode again. So I'm just going to brighten up the clothes here as well. A couple streaks down the leg. And then same thing here. Basically, I'm just accentuating those highlights that are already there. And what this does is it adds a lot of texture to your photo, and you'll see that as we turn this on and off at the end. You'll see exactly how dramatic you can really get with this. And so here you can do the little texture wrinkles in her tutu. You can follow the length of her arm down as well and just brighten up. Her forearm is a little bright already, so I'm not going to really go over that anymore. I don't want it to be too overexposed. But basically this is just the method I would use to go over the clothing. And so here again, more directional brightness of the pants. Okay, and now I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to do this same effect over the log that they're sitting on. And I don't want to do the whole log. I'm just going to do a little bit of brightness right along the top and a couple over here on this side. Again, all of this is just me playing around. On your own photo, you're welcome to paint it on or remove it from wherever you think it would look good. Okay, so you can also paint this over their head to accentuate the light that's up there. You could, again, make your brush larger, go over them a little more fully, but I want to go ahead and move on to the next step. So again, this is the first step that we did with levels, just to kind of pull them out of shadow. And you can turn this on and off and just kind of see if you missed any spots. And here I noticed that everyone else's clothing is done a little more strongly, and his green shirt here looks like it wasn't affected quite as much. So I'm just going to paint a little more on it to make it even. So basically I'm just following the textures of those little wrinkles in the shirt. And then I can come down here over his arm. And same thing here on his hand. Anybody's hands really. She's got a little light hitting her knuckles. I can accentuate it there. And then same thing straight down his arm. So I'll turn that on and off for you again. And then we will move on to the next step. And this is the true dodging and burning step. This levels was simply dodging. I just brightened. I didn't darken at all. So technically that's just dodge, not burn. But this next step will be both. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down to the bottom of my layers panel and I'm going to hit the little icon that looks like a sheet of paper with the corner turned up. And that will create a new blank layer on my image. So initially this layer is in normal blend mode. What I want to do is change that blend mode to soft light. And soft light will allow me to add a little bit of contrast to the brush strokes that I'm painting on, which is great for dodging and burning. So if you are working on an image with subjects with darker skin tones, sometimes soft light can look a little too hazy. So feel free to use overlay blend mode. It's a little bit stronger, but it does keep that contrast. So if you ever notice that when you're dodging and burning, it's a little too hazy looking, you can change it to overlay blend mode. And you might just need to turn your opacity down a little bit more, either on your brush when you're applying it or on the layer itself over here. So again, just information for later. Okay, so what we're going to zoom in and do here is basically the same thing we did with the levels layer, but on a blank layer, you will paint with a white brush to brighten and a black brush to darken. So here, I'm going to make my brush a little smaller and basically just go over those same areas again and just accentuate anything you want to. And if this seems a little bit tedious, it kind of is, but for me it pays off in the long run because I really like the effect it creates. And again, on this image, I went a little far with this effect, so you're welcome to do as much or as little as you like. So here I'm just going to kind of go over the catch lights in his eyes a little bit. I don't want to do that too much. And then just brighten up a little more here. And again, if you flip your color to black, you'll notice you can darken any areas of the skin if you'd like to. So what I do is usually go through with the brightness first. So here, paint a little on the bridge of his nose, more over his teeth, and then I'm going to zoom out just a little and then paint a little more directionally over the photo. It's a little tedious to explain my exact steps over and over and over, so if you're sick of hearing it, feel free to skip ahead, and then you can just paint this in anywhere, again, on your photo that you want. What I want to do here is make sure that I'm not forgetting any parts of the photo. So while I'm brightening his face, I also want to go over certain sections of his hair and just kind of pull a little brightness out. And same thing here on his clothes. And there's no real method to this. I'm just kind of following the texture in his clothes. And if I go a little bit too far, I know I can always mask it off later or turn the opacity down. And so if you are not sure exactly where to paint this, just kind of play around and just see what you like, and then just tweak it later if you went too far or if you feel like you could go a little further. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here and do a little more on his arm. And there, just directional, straight down the arm. You could essentially brighten the whole thing right up to the edges. I like to make my brush like a little smaller than the width of the arm and just paint a directional stroke right down the middle. So here, same thing on the pant leg. The smaller you make your brush, the more of a directional light it'll look like. I hope I'm explaining this okay. And the bigger you make your brush, the more subtle it'll look. It'll just look like the pants are a little brighter. If you paint in a smaller section, it'll look like the light just hit that area. Oh, I feel like I'm not explaining this properly. But basically, I just want to sort of enhance this. And again, if you go too far or it looks a little funny, you can always tweak it later. So just paint it on wherever you want, and then we can turn it down. Oops, hit the wrong key there. Okay, making my brush a little smaller again. Can go over the edges of her little jean vest here. And I can do the same thing in her hair. Go over the little highlights, and then same thing over the curls, just right where the curve is in the curl. I'll just go over that a little bit. And if this looks, sometimes it can look like you're not really doing much, that your brush is too turned down. So if you want to turn this visibility off of this layer, turn it off and on, you can see exactly how much you really did here. It's a buildable effect. So sometimes it helps just to turn that on and off so you can see exactly how far you've come or what you've done. Okay, so I'm just going to paint a little more onto her nose and cheeks here. Oops, I went a little far there. Okay, so to undo that, I hit Alt-Control-Z. If you're on a Mac, you'd hit Option-Command-Z. And so I just undid that, and you can paint a little more brightness on. So I'm just going to keep sweeping, and then I'll show you the before and after in just a second. So I'm going to touch over his hair as well, here on the shadows on his face, over these little textures in his shirt, little wrinkles. Okay, make my brush a little larger. Excuse me. Okay, same thing here. Gonna go over his pants. Okay, and then over his shoulder just a little bit, maybe over his brother's fingers, and here on his hands, hers as well. Her little knees have a little touch of brightness more than the rest of her legs, so I'm just go over those, and then a few sweeps down the leg. Right here on her mouth, I noticed it was just a little bit darker, so I'm just going to do a couple more sweeps over that. Basically, it's just kind of eyeballing the photo, seeing where it needs a little more brightness, and then tweaking as you go. So again, I'm going to back out here, and I want to make sure that I paint the same effect onto their surroundings. So here I'm just going to sweep a couple more sweeps on the log. And if you're wondering why I didn't just do all of this on the levels layer, the levels layer kind of adds a little bit of contrast, and then this soft light dodging and burning, it's hard to explain. It sort of adds a glowy effect that I don't find that I get with levels. This one kind of gives that hazy, soft, sort of glowy skin effect that I want. I hope that makes sense. But basically it's just personal preference. If you can do everything you want with levels, you can skip this step entirely. Notice a little bit of darkness under his lip here. I'm just gonna brighten up till that goes away. And you can zoom in and just make sure that you're getting everything. There's a little darkness under his nose too. Okay, then zoom back out. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my color to black, and I'm going to paint some darkness in wherever I want it. So here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to follow anywhere the shadows kind of fall and just fill those in with a couple clicks and sweeps of the brush. So here, just follow the edge of that log. You can make your brush bigger and fill in the whole section. You could even make your brush really big and sort of darken the edges of the frame to draw your eye right to your subject, sort of like a light vignette effect. Same thing here. Oops, my mouse is lagging a little bit there. I think it's because I'm recording a video at the same time. But basically what I want to do is just follow the shadows the same way I followed those highlights. So here along the edge of his pants where the shadows are, you can even add shadows where there weren't any. And make your brush a little smaller here. Oops, there's a little bit of a lag. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here. Starting to go a little slower. Sorry about that. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing. Just kind of follow the shadows and paint those in anywhere you want. And sometimes this can look like a little much, so we can always turn it down at the end again, like I said. Okay, follow the outsides of the arms here. It basically just accentuates that brightness that we already added. And I'm probably going to cut this just a little bit short. You kind of get the effect, the idea of this effect here. And you can always flip your color back to white as well. I notice a little bit of darkness under his nose here. I'm just going to paint some of that back on, and then I will show you our before and after. So what I'm going to do here is just take both of these layers, sorry, that we did, this dodging and burning layer and our levels layer, on and off with that one. And I'm going to use my control key or my command key to select both of those, and then hit control or command G on my keyboard. And this will put both of those layers in a group so that you can turn them on and off at the same time. So that's our before, and this is after we've added some contouring. And I do notice it's a little hazy over her face, maybe a little too dramatic, so we can always lower the opacity here a little bit, or you can go in and you can, mask off either of these layers. This one doesn't have a mask yet, but you can add one by hitting this button here. Or you can go in and you can just paint a little darkness back in to kind of counteract the shadow. Okay, and so to do that, just make sure your brush is set to black. Make your brush a little smaller, and I'm just going to kind of pop out the little shadows there in her cheeks and just a little bit under her chin, and then maybe over her lips here. You can probably also follow the bridge of her nose. Oops, goodness, went a little far with that. And just follow the bridge of her nose there. It might be a little too strong, but we can check and see when we zoom out. Grab my zoom tool, and I'm holding down my Alt or Option key just to zoom out there. Okay, so then you can go back to your group layer and turn that on and off to see the full effect. And again, lower the opacity if you feel like you went a little too far with it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on dodging and burning non-destructively on your photo. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email at morgan@morganburks.com, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/morganburksphotography. And if this is the first tutorial of mine you're watching, you can find more at morganburks.com. Thank you so much. Have a great day.